I met some of you before, during the day, and for those I didn't meet, my name's Eric Jackson. I'm a reporter here at Sportico, and for those starting to trickle back into, welcome. Yeah, we have a great panel. Three gentlemen who are live in the space every day, and we have Yang Adija, who's senior vice president of Digital League Business Operations, Innovation and Growth at Turner Sports. We have Scott Lawin, CEO of Candy Digital, and we have Tony Grillo, Chief Strategy Officer at GreenPark Sports. So thank you guys for coming on. And I was talking with a friend like 2 days ago, and she's like somewhat of a basketball fan, kind of, but like over the last year, she's all in on NBA Top Shot now, right? So I'm like, who are you, right? Like, I'm like, what's going on? So I kind of just want to ask you guys, kind of flip that to you guys, where, how are NFTs and digital collectibles just transforming how fans are engaging? Because I see people now who were never really into it, and now, it's, kind of falling right in line.
I mean, you said Top Shot. I found a tweet that I don't tweet much, but I found a tweet back in February of last year that just said I'm addicted to NBA Top Shot. So I was caught in that moment. I hadn't collected NFTs before. I came across Top Shot, and yeah, that was my moment, was quickly getting addicted to it.
Yeah, I mean, I think at Turner Sports and Bleacher, the way that we like to think about it, and I think, as you mentioned, NBA Top Shots, we partner with them in terms of doing that deal, but we look at these things as ways of really bringing the fans closer in. The fans are constantly looking for ways to be closer to the sport and closer to the athletes, and this is just another way of doing that. And it also gives people an opportunity to find, the cliched ownership. But the analogy that I try to use is that when you think about your neighborhood, if you have a renter in your neighborhood and you have an owner in your neighborhood, they treat the neighborhood differently. The owner has more invested in that neighborhood, and so they are much more likely to support the neighborhood and want to make sure that the environment is set up for it. And so I think we see this happening with Top Shots or other things within NFTs that we think are really going to be interesting within the space.
Yeah, I mean, referencing Top Shot, I think, is completely relevant. We like to say that Top Shot sort of proved that sports is the gateway drug into Web3 and the crypto world, right? Before the beginning of last year, no one really knew how to spell NFT, right? Unless you were sort of deep in the space. And suddenly this perfect storm of rising crypto prices and the back end of COVID and people rediscovering collectibles, Top Shot sort of hit at the perfect moment, right? To answer your question, though, about how it's changed, fans, I don't know that it has yet, because we're still super, super early, right? And so when we think about sports and digital collectibles and NFTs, we see collectors coming into the space, right? Whether you are a traditional card collector or a memorabilia collector, and people approach that from, a lot of different angles. And only now, I think, are we starting to see more fans come into the space, mainly because they realize, okay, this is a thing, right? And you couldn't avoid NFTs last year, right? For better or for worse. Other than, Bored Apes, sports probably got more press in the NFT space than any other content vertical. But the utility for fans has been really more a collector's utility, and I think now we're starting to see more of a fan engagement utility, and that'll bring more people in.
Yeah, I think the other thing from what we saw, because we very much started out as a Web 2 company, for those of you that don't know GreenPark, our goal is to really be the virtual world for sports and esports fans. And so we've been thinking about things like, okay, well, maybe I'm a Brooklyn Nets fan. When I actually go to a game, maybe I don't care about this, but maybe it's my kid who really wants to go inside and earn something for their character just because they actually finally went to a game. And that concept of being able to earn something digital when you're doing something physical is something that's always made sense, whether it's NFTs or not. As soon as you start to think about how that technology applies and allows you to do more with it, allows you to continue to give someone something, and for you to have given them something that they actually own, going back to your point, it just makes it that much more meaningful for the experience and for the future of what you can do with those things.
I know, in a word, it's like a buzzword, gamification, right? We kind of mentioned it before. And I mean, how imperative do you think it is for leagues and teams to really invest in gamification and, embracing it to reach those non-traditional sports fans, how do you, where do you kind of think that level is of, do they need to come in now? Should they wait a little longer? How are you guys feeling about that?
I mean, I think gamification is a super powerful force in any type of activity, right? As an engagement tool, as a way to kind of bring people into the space, as a way to make things fun, provide rewards, et cetera. I don't think it's necessarily the end-all be-all, right? I think in the Web3 space, gaming as a broad category may be the killer app, right? That may be the biggest use case in the space. But I think as it relates to sort of sports and NFTs, there's a couple different elements to it. There's the collector element of gamification, complete your collection and unlock a reward or get rewarded with something else. And then there's the gamification of just making it fun to have this new thing that you can interact with, whether you're in the stadium or whether you're sitting at home. And that is more about community, right? That's more about, how do I share my passion and my collection and my engagement with people who are following the same teams, love the same sports.
Yeah, I would agree. I think the gamification, I think the difference between sort of the gamification and sort of games within there. I think there's going to be so many things within games and actually the environment in which fans are engaging with NFTs, which will change how or will evolve or continue to extend how people are getting into sports. And the gamification is just sort of a technique that continues to have people engaged. And I think we probably overplay that sometimes, although it's very useful. But I think the opportunity to really create environments where people feel that they are enjoying their connection with their community and they're able to engage in different ways that are, I think, we're still yet to see, particularly around NFTs. So.
Yeah, I think a difficulty for me has been forever, it feels like rights holders are looking for ways to gamify something. And it really just means getting people to click around a few more times because you're further engaging them. And that's not true engagement. I remember when I worked with the PGA Tour, there was a company out there that was basically allowing you to earn money if you were served more ads and clicked on more ads through the app experience, which at the end of the day just became an annoying experience. So I think that layer of actually feeling like you are immersed in an experience goes beyond that idea of just how do we gamify something. And I think it's something that all three of us in different ways, and in some ways very similar ways that we're going about it, are looking to create kind of that over-the-top game experience that is really just a more immersive experience in the types of things that we're doing already.
Yeah, I'm curious. It's no secret, right, the way the market's been. I'm curious y'all's thoughts on just the morale, right, of the community, of the NFT community. Should people be concerned? How do you kind of just feel overall about that at this time?
So I think I'll start. 6 months ago, when everything was really getting hyped, we were just talking about this feeling of euphoria at NFT NYC back in November, and I think we all kind of felt like this can't last. And here we are today. I remember having a conversation with one of our VCs at the time that said, all of these projects say that they're going to build a game, right? Get your PFP, get your NFTs. We're going to have a game. Here's our roadmap. Here's the utility. It's the difficulty of finding all of the developers, whether they're in-house or whether they're outsourced, to go and build a game that's fun. 70% of these projects are never going to build a game was the comment that I was told. And I think a part of that was understanding that we would hit a point like this in the economy and looking at just kind of a maybe quasi-crypto winter, not quite compared to what we've been through, where a lot of those opportunities will kind of go by the wayside, but there will be really strong founding teams that continue to build through these times and really come back with something really strong.
I think this is a really critical point, and it's actually, not too dissimilar to other technology evolutions in which, there's a hype cycle. After the hype cycle, it goes down. This one just happens to be really tied into a wider or a more general swath of a population that owns these, financial, in some way, assets, and so they're being impacted more directly. But I think this usually goes through that time period in which you need to build substance, and you need to have something that has, longevity that will go to it. And I think the way that we're thinking about it at Turner Sports and Bleacher is that we want to make sure that we're building something that our fans have needed and want to engage with. We're looking to make sure that we're partnering with the right technology partners in the space so that we can build that out. But I think this is a period of which you'll have some of those who had joined in at the time to be, just have a quick flip. You'll start to see those exit because the opportunity for them just to hold on to a currency and make money is no longer there. And hopefully the more substantial projects will still be there and last throughout this period.
Yeah, I think for any new product or any new market, you need confidence and you need a positive value exchange. And that, that can be an economic value, that can be an entertainment value, it can be a community value. And so, going through a period like we're going through where crypto prices fall to the floor, people who got involved, may have thought they were going to make a bunch of money, now they've lost it. That erodes confidence, right, for the people who are in the space, and it erodes confidence for people who are curious about the space but not yet in. And so I think what that means is it means leaning more on that value exchange, right? And so I think for the types of projects that we're all working on, right, we're thinking about how do we add value to the sports fan and to the collector, right? How do we amplify what people are already doing and connect them to their passion in a different way through this technology? And that's ultimately what will bring more people into this space, not because they think they're going to pull a golden lottery ticket, but because owning this digital asset connects them to their community and to the things they love in a more meaningful way.
How do you communicate that to consumers, though, right? Like, this is long term, right? Not to just be in it for fly by night, or is there you can't do a disclaimer, right, on the transaction or anything. Like, how do you kind of just relay that, right, to a consumer?
Yeah, look, I think I'm on Twitter's a big space for the NFT and everything else, and I get frustrated because I think we spend a lot of time trying to convince audiences of value rather than just delivering value. I want to be able to go out there and just deliver value. When people see that you've delivered something that is of value to them and worthwhile, they start communicating that. They start to tell other people that, hey, I enjoy this game, or I enjoyed what my experience that I had with this, and just continue to be out there and deliver against it, rather than being, constantly being vocal and then being empty on the promise.
Yeah, I think it's one of the reasons why absent sort of stadium naming and things like that, but there isn't as much traditional marketing in this space, because the people who are the community and the customers, they're the best marketers, right? They get excited about something, they tell their friends about it, their friends get involved, right? And it becomes more viral. And so I think that really is it. It's hard to go out and sort of make that statement, right? But if you prove it in what you're doing, right, then people see it's authentic, and they become your best voice.
Yeah, I think even just thinking about the metadata that your NFTs will have and looking at the different traits, I think it's a good example to think about what you allow the community to find out versus what you tell them. And a lot of the hype that we saw 6-12 months ago around like tweet, retweet, add 3 friends, get a free NFT, get whitelisted, all that stuff, like we've increasingly moved away from, because it's not authentic, going back to what Yang said. And I think for us, I'm going to go back to the traits and the metadata. What's so great about what we saw was, it's okay, there's 10 different traits and there's different percentages of these traits, and I can kind of explore. It's like a treasure hunt of like, how valuable, how rare is this thing that I have? And that kind of like social engineering of like, why should I care? Let me find it out on my own. That is something that I think will continue to be very valuable, is say the things that are the facts about the NFTs that you're putting out in the marketplace, but ultimately let people decide how valuable they are.
Yeah, what opportunities have you guys seen just from the sports leagues and teams? Because, obviously GreenPark has to deal with La Liga, NBA, NHL, I mean, of course, Fanatics and Kenny Digital. Like, what early opportunities have you guys seen them leveraging that community for on their end?
I don't know if it's necessarily opportunities I've seen for them to leverage it, but I guess just talking through what I've seen, a lot of teams that are going out, and there's restrictions from the leagues or from rights holders as well, as far as like how many NFTs a team can have, and the rights that the league will go put out versus the rights that the teams or players will go and put out. It's super fragmented. I think what you've seen is that people haven't withheld the ability to go try something. And that's what this period has been for teams specifically, is trying things. I sat and listened to the Cleveland Cavaliers talk about their version of a locker and allowing everyone who bought a locker to get an NFT in their locker, which is really still kind of on the learning side of it. But I think that fragmentation isn't necessarily bad because it's good for people to go out through their own channels and to introduce people to these things. I think ultimately over time you are certainly going to see better alignment on how these things can all come together so we don't have lots of fragmented collections of NFTs across rights or properties.
Yeah, I don't know if this is an opportunity, but I'll say the one thing that was surprising, and maybe it shouldn't have been, was just how quickly the sports leagues pivoted to this being a money grab, right? And, you know, if we were rewinding the clock and we were all having this conversation in the beginning of last year, it was very much about education. Like, people knew what blockchain, had heard blockchain, they didn't really know what it was. Maybe they'd heard about NFTs, maybe they didn't, but they knew something was happening in Top Shot. And very quickly that went to, what's our traditional licensing model? How much money can we take off the table? And the crypto industry didn't do itself any favors by writing stupid checks. The period that we're going through now, I think, is really going to, you know, give people an opportunity to kind of take a step back and say, okay, what are we really trying to do here with our fans, right? Listen, someone's willing to write me a $50 million check, fantastic, but what actually gets delivered on the back end of that? Like, how does that improve my fans' experience? How does that help me connect to my customers in a meaningful way? Most sports leagues and teams, frankly, weren't asking those questions. Tim Clark was on here earlier. I give kudos to him and to NASCAR. They were probably one of the earliest leagues in the space, and they did the right thing. They watched, they saw what was happening, they thought about what was actually meaningful to them, how it applies to their sport, and they'll develop a great long-term program, right? Other leagues who sign these massive deals are now going to find themselves in a place where their partners may not be in business in 6 months. And so that experience from a fan perspective isn't going to be a great one.
Yeah, look, you know, we're partners with a number of these leagues, both traditionally and, you know, otherwise. And, you know, there is a learning curve for all of these leagues. In fact, there's a learning curve for everyone in the space. And I think it's going to evolve quite a bit from where it is actually, you know, now. Right now, I think everyone was strictly thinking about it from a collectible standpoint, and not even talking the economics of it, but from a collectible standpoint. And that seemed to be, or a profile picture. I think the way that this is going to start to evolve, there's so much more depth what NFTs will enable the fans to do, both from creators of it to aligning its incentives across people who own that to the communities, that we're just really scratching the surface in terms of what the opportunity can be of value that's going to be brought to NFT owners and sports fan communities. And so I think those are things that we are going to explore, and I think the leagues are still going to be able to finally get to understand as well.
Yeah, you mentioned the big money grab, Scott, and I kind of want to go there because, like, you know, some fans may feel like, you know, they're being targeted or, you know, something along those lines. And I want to ask you guys, is that just a misconception, or do you think some of that is justified? How do you kind of just feel about, you know, is it unfair? I'm curious.
I think it goes back to education in a big way. I think about fan tokens as being an obvious one, where, you know, an understanding of, if a fan thinks that they're going to go and buy a bunch of fan tokens and own a part of that team, and that the value of these fan tokens is going to go way up, like, that's a very different proposition than an understanding that I'm essentially buying into a rewards platform or a loyalty program similar to what has been in the past. They just happen to be in the form of fan tokens now that may fluctuate in value. One is a much safer mindset than the other in terms of what you might be doing there. But I do think, and it's not just with crypto or NFTs, I remember 5 years ago, the idea of a gambling partner being, like, so many things have come at us so fast, right? Like, the idea that, you know, DraftKings would be on the side of a PGA Tour event wasn't something that would have been available previously. So I think the leagues have made decisions to enter these spaces going back to just the fact that there is money there. It is also getting wider adoption. There's still probably a buffer between what is kind of the early entrance to getting to a little bit more of a safer space. And I think we're in a little bit of that figuring it out.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think if we're having this conversation in 3 to 5 years, 98% of the NFTs that sports fans have, they get for free, right? NFTs are going to become pervasive in all of the different touch points that fans and customers have. And a lot of those are going to be sponsored. A lot of them are going to be given away. And, to Tony's point, they start to represent that fan's journey and that fan's identity and create a new relationship with the team, with the athlete, with the league that doesn't exist today, right? And that's where I think this is going. That doesn't mean that NFTs in games, NFTs in collectibles aren't still going to be a big thing and be even bigger. I think they will, but the technology is just in its early use cases. This was phase one, and in the next 3 to 5 years, we're going to see 10 or 15 more that probably are stickier and more meaningful.
Yeah, and a lot of teams, Brooklyn Nets, Braves, obviously have gotten into the metaverse. I'm curious your thoughts on how imperative is it for the NFTs, like the popularity of NFTs. How much does it depend on the rise of the metaverse? Like, is that the next play? Is that where ultimately this is all leading to utilize and activate those NFTs?
Well, it also depends on how you're defining the metaverse. So if you are defining it just as a VR experience that you kind of go into and are locked into, I think that has a role in things that we're thinking about. But if you're thinking about your digital experience that you're having, I think it will all play within that. And I think we spend a lot of time digitally. Even my kids, the more time they spend, so much time in their digital environment, whether it's VR or not, and I think that's just going to continue to evolve. And I think the NFTs, I think, will play in there because now you're in a space where you can actually own things within that digital environment. You can interact from a peer-to-peer perspective within that digital environment. I think that that's going to drive new use cases to it. And as we think about it, we're trying to build things within that environment that give those NFTs utility and give them meaning, but also give the users the opportunity to engage within that space. And I think that's just going to continue to grow.
Yeah, I think the killer app for Web3 and crypto is digital identity, right? And that really is going to be at the heart of what the metaverse is. So if I have a digital wallet and I hold my NFTs in there, right now I might look at it on my phone, I might be able to throw them up on my computer screen or my TV, but if I've got ownership of that and I have license rights, I can print a t-shirt out of those and sell those, right? I can use that representation as an avatar on my Twitter account. I can create an icon that goes and lives in a virtual world, right? And so I think our definition of metaverse is this blending of digital identity, both in the real world and in the virtual world. And as NFTs become more pervasive and track all the things we do, the things we love, the people we interact with, that just gets bigger and bigger.
Right, and obviously there's been a lot of talk about just IP, right, and just protecting those rights and everything else. Like, is that just part of the growing pains here, or do you think this will be continually issues that just still need to be worked out long term?
If I wasn't working for GreenPark, I would go work in licensing, and I would strictly focus on digital experiences for licensing, because the idea of how you can interact with all of the things that we are going to offer in different virtual spaces and have our properties and the rights holders that we work with allow those interactions based on whatever those licensing requirements are, like, it will happen. It's very complicated for how we get there. Because it kind of started with walled gardens of, okay, here's an NFT collection, but it's only going to be sold here. Your marketplace is only going to be here. And that is not where we're going to go.
Yeah, I think, licensing is going to take some time, particularly with the larger brands. They have IPs to protect, and it will be a challenge for them, particularly giving up the rights to that IP so that the user can leverage or exploit it. It will be a challenge. But you'll see other IP come about that starts to show a path for, utilization within the space that, can take a sort of a lead, and then you'll see some of the larger IPs begin to follow suit. But it's difficult for them to be the first ones in that space. They like to protect their IP. They like to have the walled gardens. They like to be able to monetize it and have control. And there's a risk because, not everyone is, careful with how they, treat IP. So it's a challenge.
That's probably the biggest risk you would say ultimately, right? Like long term down the road.
Oh,
big
absolutely.
organizations, yeah.
I mean, if you just even look at just social media, where you're allowing, UGC to happen within social media, and the kind of guardrails that have to happen there, it's a challenge. You can't, it's hard to expect, large IP owners to say, great, my IP, I'm just going to throw it out there, and the users are going to be, careful with it, and it's just not the case. But we have to find that right mix so that we are enabling your fans to really add value to this, while at the same time, not, abusing it.
Yeah, I think the important thing about IP is around confidence again, right? Which is, in a world where anybody can make anything digitally, being able to say this is an officially licensed product, right? This is authentic intellectual property that represents Major League Baseball or the NBA or La Liga, gives consumers confidence that they can buy that, right? That it isn't a copy that, a copy of a copy that got thrown up on OpenSea that they don't know where it came from, right? And I think to Tony and Yang's point around the way that that's going to evolve, because IP holders do want to protect their brands, right? They do want to make sure in this new space that they don't inadvertently trip up. It's going to start in walled gardens, right, in sort of controlled experiments. And then as they gain more confidence and more users and see how it works, then it'll start to open up more broadly.
I think what's so funky about this space, and I guarantee you that this is something that you see, especially as we think about early adopters of crypto and NFTs, is yes, being able to say it's authentic, being able to say it's officially licensed, hugely valuable. On the flip side, you're looking at collectors that want to find the one of those items that actually has a flaw to it because it will be more valuable. Or, it's, oh, well, that's a league thing. I'm looking for like the OG collection. I'm looking for someone who's like trying to build the NBA of the metaverse, not the NBA now in the metaverse. And so there is some figuring out here. Over time, I fully agree. Like, that is the value. That is being able to double down on that authenticity. But it is on the rights holders to be then taking that and doing more valuable things with it that you're seeing a lot of these new creators do. Going back to just this idea of smaller entities that are going to move really quickly and make mistakes and allow you to do more with those things that you own, where rights holders might be a step behind. So it's going to be an interesting kind of race. I think over the long term, absolutely, officials what will come out on top. But it'll be interesting, kind of the path that gets us there.
Because that's the difficult part, right? Anticipating, right, the mishap, right? Because like you say, a lot of collectors are maybe unorthodox in that kind of realm of thinking, right? Like they want the OG or something of that sort, right? So do you think it's like almost too difficult to even try to prepare for that, or how does that?
It's not completely new. I always compare it to artists, right? Like there's an idea of like a Kobe Bryant picture that is either somebody takes, or it's, let's say, the officially licensed, this doesn't exist, but the officially licensed illustrator of NBA pictures, and here's Kobe Bryant, versus like that really underground artist everybody loves who makes those Kobe Bryant sneakers that's one of one somebody gets to get their hands on. That stuff exists. So it's really kind of the blending of those two together. And if there's one thing that I am bummed out about as it relates to rights holders going into the digital space as it relates to NFTs, a lot of the things that are the most valuable in the real world and exciting for collectors to get their hands on that just are allowed because the leagues don't necessarily have their hands on them or can't, are almost overprotected in this initial stage as we think about digital.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the most interesting deals in the last year was Nike buying Artifact. Artifact, for people who don't know, is sort of one of the OG NFT design shops focused on these really funky virtual sneakers, tapping into artists around the world. Nike as a brand obviously is one of the best examples of being able to create a mass market product and then something that's like super rare and unique and artist driven. And so it was almost natural for them to sort of enter into the metaverse by partnering with someone who's a team that's really authentic, creating really interesting things. The challenge now is letting that creativity exist in a big corporate structure. So we'll see.
Yeah, I remember I saw that deal and I didn't know if that was a good or bad thing for artifact collectors. They thought it was really good initially, but I think you just don't know.
That's why I said interesting, not necessarily good.
Well, that's what you were saying. You were saying if you weren't with GreenPark, you might be more interested in trying to fix the IP problem. Like, I thought that was a really good point. Like,
yeah, I mean, we talk a lot with fellow portfolio companies, and one is a licensing company that's been traditional licensing, and I would say 50% of what they're doing now is just focus on licensing in digital worlds, because they see everybody moving in so fast trying to figure it out, and it is something that is very much not figured out. So it'll be interesting. I also think like we have seen some of the levers pulled where they are getting more comfortable. With what we're doing with La Liga is one example, where our assets that we're going to be making with La Liga, which are game day jerseys as NFTs, will be on multiple marketplaces, not just our own marketplace. So getting them comfortable with that, and I think that's actually what you're probably going to see, not just us, but other partners as well, including Turner, including Candy, which are really going to take their partners and help them get a little more comfortable with things that they know the space needs. So it's really like building off the base of a good partnership. How do you then kind of lead those partners into doing things that they may not be as aware of as you are, what they need to be doing?
Well, look, one of the things that I can't wait for, though, in this space is for us to branch beyond the familiar. Right now, we're recreating the familiar in sort of this new paradigm in technology. One of the guys on our team always talks about when the iPhone first came out and people didn't know what to do with it. They would make, you see people making like little beer contests with it, and so you'd pretend that you were drinking beer from the iPhone. It was just like a gag kind of thing, but it had no utility. But people didn't know what else to do with it because they only knew for what the concepts for what they understood at the moment, and they weren't thinking about sort of the new applications, the Airbnb and everything else that we do now on our smartphones. We're going to see things that are just different than what we are used to now. And what IP does, it just helps the familiarity, so people are comfortable. Those that are not diving into the space right away are comfortable moving into the space. But it won't necessarily rely on the IP. What it's going to rely on is these new use cases that are coming from the technology, and that's going to be the interesting part. And the question is going to be, can the IP move themselves quickly enough to these new use cases that they can make sure that their IP stays relevant?
Yeah, we talk a lot about the kind of balance between the evolutionary versus the revolutionary, right? And evolving the activities and amplifying the activities that people are already familiar with, right? Utilizing the technology, and then sort of bookending that with a revolutionary product that really pushes the limits that maybe only a small subset of the community or the customer base or the fan base will understand, but sort of sets the goalposts on where we're heading, right? And then kind of moving back and forth, and I think you're going to see that broadly in the space.
I don't know if this is a question you asked, but I feel like it's something 6 months ago I would have gone into very quickly, but it's still extremely relevant today, and I think it speaks to what Yang was saying. Like, if I walk outside and I'm wearing sneakers that are not that expensive, but I think they're cool, I think they're stylish, and I want you to see me in them.
Love the Blazers.
Exciting, thank you. I thought that was just a coat until a month ago, so I'm glad I know it now. Great, you see me in sneakers, and you comment on the sneakers, and that's cool. That's it. It's just style. The things that we're able to do in virtual worlds where I can actually say, okay, we're going to do a collab with Artifact. We're going to allow Artifact holders to now come into GreenPark and not just have access to GreenPark, but if you have your Artifact kicks on, you're going to be able to immediately shoot up into a virtual platform above that only people with Artifact sneakers can go to that space. And now it's like we've created an exclusive space. We've taken the physical, turned it to the digital, and added something to it that you can't do in the real world. That is the stuff that people want to see in these virtual environments, and those are the things that you will see start to come to life and make them valuable.
But don't you think that potentially makes it more frustrating for certain people, right? If it's only exclusive in certain platforms and areas, because that's probably now, right? Fragmentation. Like, when do we get it so seamless? Like, how long does that take? Is that 2 years from now? Is that 5 years? Like, when do you just go into, yeah.
You guys may have a better answer than I do on this, but we always compare it to, like, if you walked into a mall and I sold you a T-shirt, I was like, but when you walk out of this mall, you got to give me the T-shirt back, and you can only wear this T-shirt when you come to our mall. For now, it's going and doing deals with the other malls so that you can go and you can wear that thing in those other places. I'm not sure when we get to something as seamless as what you're talking about.
Yeah, so there are a couple of things. So, because I heard two things within the question or the statement that was made. One is that, your wearing something gets you access to something. And I think that still will always apply, because I think people, you want to be in a community where, you are with like-minded people and people enjoy that community. And so it's almost a way of saying, hey, a nod to, yes, this is a community that are of those like-minded. Not that it's exclusive necessarily, but there is something that you need to do to be able to get in there so that you know that there's value within that community. The other is, as you said, the sort of walled gardens of different places. And I think that's going to be a challenge for a while until people start to see that if I open up my garden, I get more people in there because I get to cross-pollinate with other gardens. And that takes a little while because you need to have an established garden that's willing to do that. And I think you'll probably start to see that happen within the space because you'll start to see that people will say, it's, again, I'm constantly thinking about sort of economics, and if you think about those societies that were more open societies, particularly for trading, did better because of the fact that they had other places to trade with and had greater opportunities to take advantage of that than those decided to be closed societies that decided not to do it. You would last for a while, but you just would not be able to compete in the long run, and you'll start to see that take its shape within sort of the NFT sort of Web3 ecosystem.
I was going to just ask you three, I think, how much do you think if you're a sizable company, right, and you're trying to reach that demographic, right, that Gen Z demographic, are you behind if you're not investing right now in Web3 and NFT? Are they late to the party, or you think they're, think about the market and everything else, are they doing the right timing? How do you guys feel?
I wouldn't say that you're behind because we're still early in the stage, but I think what you are is you're behind in the learning. There's still a lot of learning that has to happen here. And I think the best way to be able to do it is getting your hands dirty. And if you are trying to do it from afar, it just takes a little bit longer. Or if you're just one that has deep pockets and you're just waiting to acquire someone, then that's a strategy you can take. But we've learned a lot by participating, and I think that that's the key about being in the space.
Yeah, I agree, and I think there's a lot of opportunities to kind of trip up in the space, right? I think a lot of brands sort of felt pressure. Hey, we've got to do something in Web3. We've got to create an NFT, and the right sentiment to Yang's point, get involved, learn, understand what works, see what's happening, but you've got to do it in an authentic way, right? Because customers in the community can sniff that out pretty quickly, right? And so I think what you'll see, whether it's in sports or away from that, is the leagues or the brands that do adopt that test and learn strategy, right? And think about, okay, ultimately, what is the long-term objective? We're gonna try some things. We're gonna see how they work. We're gonna figure out how we amplify. They'll create the most successful projects and the most successful connection to their customers.
Yeah, I think if you don't believe that virtual worlds are going to be where time spent and money spent will be a very significant thing, I think 20% of Nike SKUs will be digital in 10 years. Yeah. I don't know if you guys would agree with that, but
it's a hot take right here.
To me, it feels very real. If you don't think that that's coming, whether it's 20% or less, whatever, then you are missing it. If you don't think that NFTs are going to be a thing, you don't have to believe that 98% of everything that you're going to get is going to be an NFT. But if you don't believe that it's going to be a thing, yes, you're missing out. And so I go back to learnings. If you're not paying attention right now, if you're not, whether it's listening to podcasts, going to conferences, but I think the biggest thing is launching your own projects that you can learn from, then you are going to fall behind.
Yeah, I would love to get a 5-year hot take from everyone. Scott already said 98%, right? 3 to 5 years will be free NFTs. I'm going to hold him to it too. I'd love to kind of get you two just thoughts too. Scott too, long term, right? The next 5 years, kind of a bold prediction on where we are today versus it.
I'll just expand on that statement because what I mean by that is I think in 3 to 5 years, the vast majority of our social interactions and brand interactions will have the potential to have an NFT attached to it, right? Whether that's buying a consumer product, whether that's going to a sporting event, whether it's going to see a concert, and it becomes part of that digital identity, right? It becomes a record of the things that we do, the communities that we're a part of, and that's going to become increasingly important, right? Listen, all you have to do, if anyone has kids, look at what your kids are doing. Right? Your kids are playing Roblox, your kids are on Fortnite. They're in these connected social communities that have real value and have real status. They don't know what they're doing, but they're telling you every single day that that their presence online is important to them and important to their social circles, that's the future.
Hot take. I think, you know, I don't know, 5, 10 years from now, I think we'll look back and the killer app for NFTs will not be one that's out right now, and it will be based on, you know, the behavioral changes that NFTs brings to both community and users. And what I mean by that is that even if you look at how blockchain is built, it is built on incentives being aligned. So someone that's actually mining and the person that wants the coin and people wanting to trade it, all of those are aligned by how the blockchain is set up. I think NFTs leads to the same thing. And I think you will see that by ownership of the NFTs and people participating in NFTs, you'll see different behaviors that will come from it. And people will be bought into their community because of the fact that they are part of that community and own it.
This may be the coldest take ever. Significant regulation in the next 2 years. That stings a lot near term, but allows everything to grow in a massive way in 5 years. I think it kind of goes back to even as we talk about like where the market is right now, kind of saw it coming, but it's a time to build. Like this market needs regulation. I had stuff stolen out of my MetaMask account like 2 weeks ago. Like it happens. It's not great. It needs to get better, and regulation will help to make that happen. It'll seem a little backwards to a lot of people who have been kind of OG Web3 before it comes back. So again, I don't think that's a hot take, but I think it's
No, and regulation's really important. I think, like, how much do you think that hurts the morale too, right? As far as once that kind of comes more into the full, right? Because you had some of the day ones, right? As we say, you know, do you expect them to leave, or how does that go once it starts to, if it does, which I think most of us can anticipate it will, but.
My take would be it definitely hurts the morale of people who were here early because they won't necessarily understand what it can bring. It hugely helps the morale of lots of other people who are kind of skeptical around what this market means and what the opportunity is because they demand regulation to actually get comfortable with something.
You know, it's kind of like when you have that friend that's always like, hey, I know this new artist, and it's like he's underground artist, you know, no one really knows about them, and they're all over them, and that artist becomes, you know, Jay-Z. Then they start saying, oh, he's corny, I don't like him anymore, because everyone starts to like him. Yeah. You know, I think it'll be in that sort of same sort of way. It's going to be like, look, it is, yes, the OGs will be in a place where they're like, oh, it's so over-regulated and everything else, but it will be such more of a vibrant community now because the guardrails are there. And look, I've been in the space for a while, but I'm also in a large corporate company, and I think for me, it helps me to push things along when I know that there's the right regulations that's around there. Otherwise, I just can't get things passed internally if it's not.
Right. Scott. You hit it on it, right? Do you have any questions? I'd love to take some real quick from these guys. Show of hands. Anyone?
We covered it all,
No?
huh?
Thorough.
Well, thank you guys for coming on. I appreciate it. Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.